One strong piece of evidence for biblical creation came out of the RATE project. Part of this project involved testing a very important assumption of radiometric dating. The assumption tested was that atomic decay rates are constant for each isotope. This is an important experiment because if nuclear decay rates were greatly accelerated at any time in the past, radiometric dating would be completely invalid. The research started with radioactive uranium isotopes and their decay products measured in the zircon crystals found in granite. The key to testing the assumption of radiometric dating is the diffusion rate of helium out of zircon crystals based on the amount of radiometric decay that has been estimated to have occurred in the subsequent helium produced over the amount of time that the crystals have existed. The scientists doing this research created models based on both time periods. One was a uniform rate of decay over the approximately 1.5 billion years that zircons were dated to. The other was a period of accelerated nuclear decay during the biblical time scale. This event would have been during the Genesis flood. As this graph shows, when the models were compared to actual measurements of the helium diffusion rates, they perfectly matched the prediction of the young Earth model with accelerated nuclear decay. Old Earth proponents among both creationists and evolutionists have attacked these results, but one thing they have never done is explain why the young Earth model produced such an excellent prediction. One old Earth creationist group even back-calculated the initial helium amounts to come up with an old Earth model that fit the measured helium diffusion rates. This was an act of pure manipulation that is not becoming of anybody who calls himself a scientist, let alone a Christian, and yet this group engaged in such manipulation to save an old Earth model against what the Bible actually says. One of the primary ways that these results are attacked is to claim that Dr. Humphreys was assuming constant temperatures throughout the history of the rocks, and that the rocks could easily have been hotter or cooler during their history. While this is true in theory, it does not help their model. First of all, warmer temperatures would only make the problem worse for an old Earth, because it would increase the diffusion rate. Second, for the crystals to have its slow enough diffusion rate for 1.6 billion years, they would have to spend most of that time with the warmest one being at just below 0 Celsius and the coolest one being just above -200 Celsius. In other words, you would basically need a cryogenic Earth that would be incapable of supporting life in order for the measured helium diffusion rates to work on an old Earth. Another thing that is frequently used to attack these results is the fact that accelerated nuclear decay would produce a lot of heat. The argument goes that it would produce so much heat that it would boil the floodwaters and kill every living thing on the ark. Now, that would be true, but only if the heat was not dealt with in some way. The same thing could be said for your car's engine. Your car's engine would quickly destroy itself from the heat that it produces if it did not have a cooling system to remove the heat that it produces. Consequently, all that you need is some way of dealing with the heat. Several possibilities have been proposed. The simplest of which is that because the Genesis flood was a supernatural act of divine judgment to begin with, God could simply have gotten rid of the heat. While possible, it's not a satisfying solution. It's more of an ultimate. If all else fails, it is an option. A second option would occur if the solar system were time-dilated, increasing the rate at which the existing expansion of the universe would occur relative to the solar system, producing an increased cooling effect. God could have accomplished this with the equivalent of a gravitational well with the solar system at the bottom, but in space that was still flat. A third possibility would be the existence of what I like to call dark coolant. This would be a subatomic particle that absorbs the infrared energy that transfers heat between molecules and re-emits it as neutrinos, which then pass harmlessly out into space. This has the advantage in that it could actually be tested by actually discovering such a particle. The final possibility would be that God produced heavy element fusion within the Earth and even other bodies of the solar system precisely to cause a cooling effect. The simple fact of the matter is that fusion processes that produce any element beyond iron actually result in a net absorption of energy. At first, the atoms would be in a slightly excited state, resulting in accelerated decay. This would have absorbed more than sufficient heat to counteract accelerated nuclear decay. It will actually have created additional cooling with most of the energy still locked up in heavy elements. This idea would not only explain why accelerated nuclear decay occurred, but why radioactive elements existed on Earth in the first place. It needs to be noted that the diffusion rates here could have just as easily fit the old Earth model or something in between. The fact that the helium diffusion rates so perfectly fit what was predicted by the young Earth creation model is strong evidence for biblical creation and its time scale.